Right, so we made it. There's always that kind of panic, but it's all working very well. Welcome to RunChatLive, episode 25, which is pretty incredible to think that last year it was just a quick 10-minute idea to tell you about my experiences in Kenya. But yeah, we're here with 25. And as you may well hopefully have seen, we've got actually a live conference happening in October on the 30th and 31st in Brighton in the UK. Which with 10 speakers, like I say, the joy of the podcast is I can invite and chat to whoever I like, which is just fantastic kind of ego trip and power trip. But this conference has been, I've invited 10 speakers who I've supported and loved and cherished for kind of like sometimes in some cases up to kind of 10 years. So yeah, it's finally come together. If you haven't seen the information, then just look on any of the websites or just go direct to runchatlive.com. One of those speakers is going to be with us today, Mr. Simon Bartold. If you know anything about or have any interest in the research on footwear, running shoes, then you should, in theory, already know the name Simon Bartold. You can't really get by looking into the history of shoes without seeing the history of Simon Bartold. So if you already know about him, this will hopefully be a fantastic opportunity for you to listen to his wisdom for the next hour. If you don't know about him, well, you're going to have a fantastic journey through what we love, the evidence behind running footwear. There's probably very few people out there who have got as wide a knowledge and experience. We're talking about, as I said in the advertising, 20 years working for Asics, recently headhunted by Salomon and headed their road running selection, as well as 4 Olympic Games. Well, it's huge history, as you would expect. And a really nice bloke as well, being Australian and all that. So without further ado, what I will do is I will bring him up. We'll have a quick 5-second countdown, and you'll be able to get a chance to say hello to the legend himself. There we are, Mr. Bartold.
G'day, Matt. How are you?
It's always that panic. You're going to go, I'm just not going to hear nothing coming out.
Yeah, with a head like mine, it's probably better if it was just video.
Modest as ever. So, for so many reasons, I have to say thank you. We could spend the next hour just saying thank you. I know where are you at the moment? In Antwerp, is it? Or
I'm in Antwerp at the moment, yeah.
And you've been traveling since?
Yeah. Well, you can hear from my voice I've got air traveller's throat, but I can't. Yeah, I think I hit Europe. Well, I hit London on Tuesday, I think, and it then proceeded to dump with rain for the next 3 days, and then I was up in Dublin, and now I'm down in Belgium. So,
man, so I really appreciate it. You do sound like you're about to fall. So if you do need just to go to sleep for a while, I'll just talk over you. Just try and stay on cam.
I feel fine. It's just it sounds like I've been smoking cigarettes and drinking whiskey, which I can promise you I haven't. But it kind of sounds that way.
Which probably takes us nicely to your earlier days, your youth, where I'm sure you started doing exactly that. We're going back quite a long way, aren't we? I don't want to make you feel old, but where did it all start? When did you graduate? Go on, say the year.
Well, I started out life as a zoologist, actually. So my real passion has always been animals and bugs and stuff like that. So I actually went to uni and did a double degree in zoology and physiology. And of course, as a result of that, I was eminently unemployable. Like I wanted to go and work for the CSIRO, which is the main organisation in Australia, but basically you had to wait for somebody to die before you could get a job there. So that wasn't all that good for me. So my dear old dad said, "Why don't you have a look at podiatry?" I said, "What? What are you talking about?" I thought he'd gone mad, but as it happened, that's what happened, and it's been a pretty wild ride, I have to say. It's been incredible.
So what year did you mention the year then?
I didn't mention the year, no.
Was that deliberate? Am I not allowed to ask an old podiatrist how old he is? Or?
So I graduated from podiatry in 1981. Wow. So I've been around for a while.
See, this is tricky because I'm always harping on about logical fallacies and kind of like the idea that if something's old, it must be telling the truth, because we know in our profession it's not always the case. But there's also this rule that there's a kind of a contradiction to every rule. So that's you, I guess, because you've been here for a long time, but you've seen a lot of changes, haven't you? And you've kind of rolled with it and probably said things you regret in the past. Is there anything that stands out, actually? I like firing questions you weren't expecting. So is there anything you remember saying in your youth or in the earlier days, which at the time you thought, yes, 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 and now you think, oh, my God, what was I saying back then?
Oh, look, too many to mention, really. I mean, because as you point out, things have changed. And, you think of all the things that you believed in back in the day and that you peddled to your patients. And, I look at it now and I think I'm kind of horrified by all of that and think, gee, but the point is that people shouldn't actually hide behind that, because that was the knowledge of the day. That's what we knew, and that's what we thought we knew. And that continues to this day, doesn't it, Matt? I mean, there's stuff we're probably saying now that in 2 years' time we'll look back and think, why the hell did I say that? So, it's probably not true.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's healthy to hear, for younger therapists, to hear you saying that, who's been in the game for so long, because one of the kind of obstacles, I think, that when younger therapists hear this new information, and probably some of the stuff which you're going to say today, there's that kind of reaction of, oh no, I'm not, I've spent thousands of pounds on this education, this certificate, and now you're telling me I have to throw it all away and start again. No, it can't be right. There's this kind of like fear. But we're not saying, it's never a case of throwing it all away, is it? It's just a case of tweaking slightly or not putting as much emphasis on something.
No, not at all. I mean, I saw something really interesting posted yesterday. I don't know whether it was Greg Lehman, it was somebody, and it was on the hype cycle. I don't know whether you know about the hype cycle, but it's a very interesting thing where basically you have an idea that takes you to an expectation, and then you have this incredible dip in the graph where you have what's called the valley of disillusionment. And this is typically what happens with us as we go through university, and we think we come out of uni, we think we know it, and we go and practice our profession, and then suddenly we get very disillusioned. But what actually happens with the graph is, after that peak and that trough, if you're any good, you actually come back up to a point where you have like a linear graph that continues for many years, because you do start to understand that nothing's cast in stone, and that it's very healthy to question ideas. And you must read and you must attend conferences, and if you don't do that, then you're never really going to be a decent clinician. So I think that to me, that really sums it up and illustrates it very well.
Definitely, yeah. And I remember seeing it. I think it was Greg Lehman's partner in crime on their podcast. It was none other than Mr. Adam Meekins. And I think it was an interesting post of his as well, because I don't think he swore or kind of slagged anybody off during that post. He just kind of made a point, which was interesting to see.
He's the only man in our industry who may have a similar or equivalent beard to you.
Yeah, but let's not go into who had it first. But yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Similarly luxuriant, I would have thought.
I think I thought you were going to compare him to kind of you in your former days, because you still, but I think I've heard you in the past saying that one of the reasons you've had such an illustrious career is you weren't afraid to speak your mind and kind of like just kind of ruffle some feathers.
I don't know whether I ever actually said that. I did actually get asked by Sneaker Freaker once, what my job was at Asics, and I said, well, I'm the bullshit detector, and that's a title I actually carry with some pride, because I still sort of see myself in that sense to some degree.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, sometimes I worry it's become too much of a thing, but all this kind of myth busting and kind of like calling people out and stuff. It seems like there's an awful lot of therapists doing that these days, slightly older therapists. But I always think you've got to have that humility, because like you said, the stuff we're going on about now in a year's time might kind of be, the evidence might not be there or might be less. So you've got to kind of be careful, haven't you?
Yeah, look, I think in this day and age, there's a very fine line between trolling and being constructively useful. I think that you can actually put alternative ideas forward without actually having to put people down on their ideas. And I mean, some people, interesting discussion we could actually have, Matt, about the relevance of clinical experience versus the academic side of things, which I always think is there's a major disconnect between the two. I've just been to a podiatry conference which was very academically driven and of virtually no clinical value. And, that's a bit of a problem, because when you've got academics saying, well, actually nothing you do has any value or any basis in science, that's I've got a bit of a problem with that, actually.
It's very true. Yeah, and it's something, well, you can talk about, mate, you can talk about whatever you like, because I've my money's on whatever comes out of your mouth is going to be useful. So what was it? I mean, this conference in particular, give us some examples then.
So they had an epidemiologist there, and she basically stood up and said, well, orthotics don't work, stretching doesn't work, extracorporeal shockwave therapy doesn't work. medication doesn't work, cortisone doesn't work. And, you know, I mean, I read a lot of literature because it's what I do for a job these days. And I know that I know there's great conflict in the literature. But my point would be, well, maybe we don't have the evidence in the literature for all of these things, but we do actually have a bunch of people who, for whatever reason, and it might be placebo, I don't know, but who, for whatever reason, consistently get very good results and do follow things up properly and do test and retest. And I think that's quite interesting, because we're not, the big gap here is we don't have very good quality clinical research being published. We just have a bunch of people who are doing systematic reviews and meta-analyses, and that's useful. But you know, I just put together a 7-hour workshop on shin pain, Achilles pain, heel pain, and knee pain, and it nearly bloody drove me mad, because for every paper I could find that was supporting one theory, I could find another paper that was completely bagging it. This is current literature, 2019 literature, and it's just like, what do you do? What do you do? And that's, I think, where the clinicians should actually be coming in and saying, well, we've got this, it's clinical research, but we've got this series that we've run, like Jack Taunton, you know, that we've run over 20 years. And we can show you the data that intervention A is actually having good outcomes with condition B. And I think there's a real gap there somewhere, and I don't know how to get over that.
Yeah, it's definitely a part of the challenge. And there is a lot of, we know this isn't true, this isn't true, this isn't true, this isn't true. And it's part of the era we're in, I suppose, but we've got to make sure that there's also advice for younger therapists as well. Well, yeah, this isn't true, but try this, try this, try this. Otherwise, it gets a little bit kind of negative. Anyway, so I'm hoping that people tuning in for this, I mean, one of the ideas behind RunChatLive is there's going to be information which the therapist can pick up and use, but also runners and triathletes. It's kind of that middle ground, which I think sometimes is a problem with there's no communication. Like you say, it's all too academic. And patients aren't going to understand it, or vice versa. Sometimes runners and patients, it's a little bit too simplistic and they need a little bit of education. So we're talking about shoes. Originally, I wrote it up like the future of shoes, which is what you're going to be talking about at the conference in October, which is great. But I suppose to look at the future of shoes, you've got to really understand the past of shoes and where it's all kind of changed. Yep. I'm always conscious and I always worry that we're kind of bringing up old news, because I think we all live in our bubble. We're kind of follow people who are singing from the same page. But I went to a company online who I won't mention any brand names, but I just looked at their how to find a shoe, and just be interested what, you know, this is a big brand and what the runners are going to see when they look at it. So I thought one way we could look at what's happening now and maybe dispel, here I go again, a few myths, is have a look at what came up. Does that make sense? Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up this little picture here. For the people listening to the podcast, don't worry, I'll describe what's going on. So all we're doing is we're looking at, well, at the moment, we're looking at a picture of Mr. Simon Bartold looking at a shoe, which we will probably talk about later on. Lots of information where you have been myth busting and kind of trying to set the record straight for a lot of years, which makes this even more problematic. So what we've got here for people listening is I've scrubbed out the name of the brand, but it's a shoe finder online. Okay, it's a massive big brand, and it's you need your shoe, then follow this route. And as soon as you click on it, it divides you up into, are you a man, a woman, or a child, which kind of, I suppose, makes sense. We could stop and talk about the difference in injuries between, or potential injuries between women and men, but we might come back to later on. The next thing is it asks if you're going to road or trail, which is good. Okay, obviously there's probably a difference in the type of shoe you're going to need depending on whether you're going to be running road or trail. So we may well talk about that in a little bit as well. It talks about mileage. Okay, so happy days. Probably if you're going to be training for a marathon, then you're going to be putting more mileage in, ramping that up quicker. So maybe we would consider another shoe. We could come back to that. But then it all kind of falls down. And this is where I'm going to bring Simon back in, because page 4 of this, regardless of the questions they've asked, is, are you an overpronator, an underpronator, a severe overpronator, or neutral? And that, before they suggest a shoe, is where the person reading this, the runner, is going to have to choose, does their arch fall down? Does it stay up? Simon, let's bring you in. What's wrong with all about that?
Well, you know, Matt, it's all about definition of terms, isn't it, really? I mean, I'd go back 2 slides and say, well, I want a definition between road and trail as well. because my definition would be if you can drive a vehicle on it, it's a road. And there's a hell of a lot of people who say they go trail running when they're actually road running. And in terms of how you choose the shoe, that's actually quite important, isn't it? But if we get onto this, look, this is the issue, mate. I mean, this whole model of looking at the frontal plane is complete knackers as far as I'm concerned. I mean, we know from the vast body of literature that you really can't match a shoe to a foot type based on its frontal plane position. If we look at what is really interesting is, can you do something like this and look at sagittal plane? So would it be more relevant to look at, dare I say, because it's quite controversial, but would it be more relevant to be looking at stack heights and drop and maybe come up with 30 to 36 variations of how you might try to identify the need of a shoe for an athlete? It would seem to me that's a lot more useful and a lot more predictable and a lot more appropriate than what we're seeing on the screen now. Because the bottom line is, as you well know, is what is your pronation? Well, I don't understand that sentence anyway. It sounds very American, but that's a great question. What is your pronation? The answer is nobody knows. Nobody in the world knows. Nobody can define it. There's no way we can say how much is too much. There's no way we can say how much is too little. And therefore, if you're amortizing that to the stratification of shoes for motion control, stability, or cushioning, well, it doesn't make any sense at all. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
Problem.
I mean, so to make it clear, because I mean, every time I think it's getting a bit better, I mean, this is the first time when I knew you were coming on, we were talking about shoes, I thought, let's have a look at what the major brands are kind of putting out there. And just when I thought that I'm hearing less runners coming in saying, oh, I know what the problem is, I pronate, me thinking, yeah, I know you pronate, that's how you managed to walk from the door to me here now. But whilst this stuff's online, so are you saying, and this is a leading question, but any gait analysis, and I use the term gait analysis kind of in inverted commas, which is based on how much you pronate, is looking at something that's irrelevant?
Yeah, absolutely. And also it could potentially lead you to the exact wrong decision. I can give you a good example of that. So I've got a video of a patient I saw many years ago, and the video is called Death by Pronation, because this guy is literally walking with his navicular dragging on the ground. So you've never seen a more pronated individual. And I showed this, especially, I'm not picking on retail here, but I show it especially to retail, but I've shown it to many podiatrists and physios as well. And say, well, what would you put this guy in? And they all say, well, I've obviously put him in a motion control shoe because he's so pronated. And I say, well, would it surprise you to know this bloke didn't come in to see me with an MSK injury? Yes, that would be surprising. Would it surprise you to know this guy's chosen sport was basketball? Yes, that would be surprising. Would it surprise you to know that this guy played basketball for Australia in 2 Olympic Games and he never had an MSK injury? Never. And now you're telling me that you want to put him in a motion control shoe, but actually he's pronated at his end range of pronation. So he's right at his end range and he has no range through supination pronation. So his absolute requirement is for cushioning. And if you put him in a motion control shoe, you'll probably take this non-injured athlete and you'll probably injure him because you haven't understood what's going on. So that's the best example I can give you of how this whole issue of focusing on the frontal plane becomes irrelevant in terms of its link to injury, because we know there is no link to injury. There's a suggestion, but there's no absolute link. And also the suggestion that you could prescribe a shoe that would accommodate that. It's very difficult.
Okay, people. So, I mean, I remember kind of saying similar stuff. I made a lot of enemies. Well, not real enemies, but a lot of shoe shops wouldn't talk to me or mention my name. Maybe, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago when I first kind of started. Because I remember talking about the same thing. I definitely remember doing gait analysis and looking to how much they overpronated, inverted commas. We didn't sell shoes at the time. I remember using the terminology and suggesting this might be a problem, blah, blah, blah. But then I think in my case, it was probably Ian Griffiths actually was one of the first conversations I had. Who's another speaker at the conference coming up. I'm sure you were saying it at the same time, if not before, but it was Ian who I came across. I remember having a conversation because I remember using the term pronation slightly differently when I was doing my kind of strength and conditioning. It was the National Academy of Sports Medicine, and they were referring to kind of the combination of movements which is involved in deceleration. And it was kind of, I was arguing with Ian, who was very much the term should be struck from our language as no such thing. And I was like, yeah, but if the body's not able to actually decelerate properly, and he's going, yeah, that's different though. You're talking about kind of the moment, you're talking about the ability to go in and come out. And the term overpronation suggests that you're traveling too far, that there's actual a line where once you cross that, like you say, with a basketball player, then you're going to get injured. And that's the issue, isn't it? There is no line. There's no norm. You've got your basketball example. You've got Haile Gebrselassie as one I use in my workshops, which again is an N=1, but it's not really, because there's plenty of examples of elite athletes out there who, if you froze them on their mid stance, then that medial arch would be, like you say, touching the ground, a Vicular dragon. But we forget about them, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, it's a much bigger question, really, because you could look at you could look at Tika Galana, and you could look at the way she runs. And it would be a brave person that actually changed the way she ran, because she won the gold medal in London in 2012. So she's the best female marathon runner in the world, but she's got this horrible style. So it's, when you start changing these things, it does become quite difficult. But, the biggest problem for us in relation to footwear is that there is this suggestion that somehow you can apply this magical product and it is going to make a difference to it. And I think I actually predated Griff, because at great expense in July of 1999, I made a video with the words motion control being flushed down a toilet with sound effects. So that's a long time. That's a long time ago, right? So that's how long I've been rabbiting on about this for, and finally we seem to be getting some traction with this. People are actually understanding that, yeah, it's not about whether you pronate or not. It's about what are your aspirations as a runner. And most runners want to get. They want to get faster, they want to get fitter, they want to get stronger, they want to develop technique. And so the whole thing falls down, because running's like any other sport. It's an aspirational thing. So you shouldn't stay in the same shoe anyway. So, no matter whether you're pronated or not, as you develop as a runner and you lose weight and you get faster and you get stronger and you develop technique, your product, the thing you're wearing on the end of your foot should actually be changing, because you're not the same runner you were when you went into the running shoe store to lose weight a year ago.
Yeah, that's very true. This is, I remember I was chatting to JF Asculia the other day, and we were talking about the same sort of thing. He came up with something which stopped me a little bit in my tracks, which I love the opportunity of talking to great minds like him and yourself, although maybe you guys disagree in a little bit. But I was talking about variability, and I mentioned, I can't remember who the test was by, but remember that study which was suggesting that rotation of shoes would reduce injury risk a little bit. And I think we all made quite a big deal about it at the time, showing that it was proof that you should vary your shoes. And he came out and said, like, yeah, but if you keep varying your shoes, then you're not, the idea is if you keep applying the same load, it could lead to injury, but unless you keep applying that same load, your body's not going to get sufficient stimulus to adapt and get stronger. So he was he was like, if you can, you need to stick to that same shoe so you can get stronger, or at least have one main important shoe. And I was like, yeah, I can see what you mean there. Comments?
Oh, I completely agree with him. I think I'm not suggesting that you should be changing your shoes all the time. I'm suggesting that if you are somebody who starts off as a novice runner and you're 2 stone overweight, and assuming that you run for 12 months and you do not get injured and you've lost 2 stone and you've developed technique and you've got faster, I'm suggesting that, see, the problem we have, Matt, is that people go into a store and the assistant says, well, I see you're wearing the Kano 25. Here's the Kano 26. Proceed to the cash register. It shouldn't work that way. So I think that, I quite often get asked why runners get injured, and I love telling people, well, it's because they get up in the morning, they put their shorts on, they put their running shoes on, they walk out the front door and they turn right. And they always turn right. And if only they turn left 2 out of their 4 runs, well, then they're doing what JF says. They're varying them. They're varying their routine, their terrain, their surface, their camber on the road, and that's really, really helpful thing to do for a runner.
That's a really nice idea. I like that. That brings it down. It's so beautiful. Sometimes in life you just got to take a left. It's brilliant. That's really nice. I'm going to use that. I might credit you, I might not. So okay, well, let's take it down to, again, with the layman in mind, with the runner. So, and this is where it gets difficult. Okay, you've got your shoe shop. you've got that guy coming in or that girl. You're not going to give them a gait analysis to see if they overpronate or not. No. How are you going to find a shoe for them? What would your tests be if you were there?
Well, I probably would still have a look at them running, but I think the really key thing is that if you just do an analysis from behind, well, then obviously you're missing 75% of the stance phase of gait. So you've really got a fraction of the whole picture. So all you got to do, there's no excuse these days. You can do it on your phone. Look at them from behind, look at them on the side, look at them from the front, and then you've got a lot of changes. So you can look at transverse plane deviation, as well as frontal plane, as well as sagittal plane. You can look at how the shoe is interacting with the foot. In other words, is the foot sitting correctly on the platform, which is actually quite important. Is it moving from one side down? They're very basic things you can do. Then I think you can filter in things like the comfort filter, which is good, and the noise filter. So how noisy are they when they're running this shoe? Is it slapping? There are really simple things like that you can do that will give you some clues. And I think it's probably a process of 3 or 4 shoes, and you'll probably have one obvious outrider, and you'll probably have another shoe that's obviously not as good as 2 others. So you have 2 that are probably quite equal, and then the decision will come down to the comfort filter and the noise filter. So ultimately, the athlete is going to say, well, there is one that actually clearly feels better than the other. And I think that's terribly simplistic, isn't it? But I think what actually happens is that people get pushed into a product that is what the retailer or the clinician thinks is best for them, and they walk out of the store or the clinic and they think, well, actually, this thing's really uncomfortable and I don't like it at all, but it must be okay because I've just paid £90 for an opinion, so I've got to wear it. And I think that's actually where the system falls down a bit there. I think that happens quite a bit. So that would be my sort of homespun philosophy on easy things you could do to try to make a decision.
Yeah, I think the other difficult with comfort is, I mean, like JF said, the idea behind comfort is not so much that comfort's definitely going to reduce injury, but it means the runner's going to get home, they're going to get out and run, get some consistency, enjoy their running. All these factors, are probably going to reduce the chance of them getting injured. But it's tricky paying $100 to be comfortable, isn't it? Often runners need a little bit more science behind it if they're going to spend that sort of money.
Yeah, I think if you follow that algorithm, a basic algorithm of doing a basic gait analysis, and if you've got somebody whose feet are pointing on backwards, well, then clearly they need some sort of intervention. But I think that when you look at, okay, well, I can get a basic idea for where I think they should be within what the brands offer. And we'll get on to how that should be changing in a minute. But I've got a bit of an idea in my mind for 3 or perhaps 4 shoes that might offer something to this athlete. And then we're going to look at whether it's slappy. So what's the, this ubiquitous term ride? What's the ride of the shoe like? I mean, is there an obvious issue with the way this is transitioning from wherever you strike to propulsion? And then is it comfortable? Because if it's bunching in the forefoot or your heel slipping, that shoe's never going to perform properly for you. Because to a large degree, comfort is not this sort of esoteric thing that I think we read a bit about. I think comfort is a performance-related feature because if the shoe doesn't fit properly, it won't work properly. So comfort is all about fit to a large degree. So I think that's terribly important. But I mean, basically what we have to get over here is we have to get over the terrible lies the industry has been telling for 40 years that somehow you can solve all problems by either having increased cushioning or by having motion control, and that's simply not true.
Yeah, and it's tricky, isn't it? Because you've got these other facts, haven't you? Chances are that the team in the shoe shop are going to be maybe 17, 18 years old. They haven't got the life experience. They haven't got that much mileage in their feet, probably. They haven't experienced injuries. They don't know what it's like. It's very tricky. I heard something the other day when I was doing a little bit of catching up on the many, many things which you've said in your time. It was about vibration. And it was about how that's... how the attenuating of vibration thing is a big thing in shoes, and it's something that often the market misses because it's concentrating more on kind of the kinematic factors. Could you go into a little bit more of that?
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, it's something that Ben O'Nigg's been banging on about for quite some time, and he's sort of been studiously ignored in all of this, but it feeds back into so many interesting things like muscle tuning. But basically, we did a lot of research on this at Salomon at a very high level and at great expense. And so we figure that we've actually got a reasonable handle on it now. But the basic equation is that there's this large black hole, which is vibration, because you've got a whole lot of potential input loads. So you've got pressure, you've got force, you've got joint moments, you've got accelerations, and you've got vibration, which can have a magnitude and a frequency. Now, it seems like the vibration is probably responsible for about 25% of all input load. So it's a very large load, and it's extraordinary. It hasn't been looked at, because basically when you strike the ground, obviously you generate a shock wave, which is a vibration that goes through your whole system. Now, if you don't attenuate that vibration, then eventually it will end up in your skull, which will vibrate, which means that you won't be able to see properly and you won't be able to hear properly, and you'll probably fall over. So that's an extreme example, but that's basically what happens. So, of course, being humans, having this incredible physiology, we've got systems in place that allow us to attenuate that shock going through our system. And the main way you do it is via muscle contraction. So if you have decent lean muscle mass, the muscles, when they contract, will actually attenuate that vibration. So virtually none of it is transmitted above the knee. Okay? Which you should be thinking, now that's very interesting, because in road running, most of the injuries occur from the knee down. Okay, so there's the further down you go, the higher the level of vibration is going to be, so the less it's attenuated. So if you looked at, for example, the foot and ankle, well, there aren't too many muscles there that really can attenuate vibration, so you have very high levels of vibration at that level. So the only other thing you can do that's going to help is a shoe, right? So the shoe's the other piece of the jigsaw here, that it can help. But getting back to muscle contraction, of course, the issue here is that if you're having to contract muscles to attenuate the vibration, what's going to happen over a 10K run? It's going to affect your fatigue. And what happens when you get fatigued is that you change the way you run. In other words, you change your biomechanics. And then you may well be in a situation where you do have the window of opportunity for injury. So it may well be that vibration is actually a smoking gun. And we don't know that for sure. We've got some pretty strong suspicions that it's way more important than it's been given credit for.
So it's something that's very exciting, which I don't know. I like to try and think I stay quite. I mean, I've got 2 little kids, so I'm not as hot as I was on the research and following everybody. But I like to think there's probably a few therapists out there involved in running who aren't as aware of it as they should be. So is this something that's gone up on? I'm just thinking, have you blogged about it and written about it? Where can they find more information on it?
I've certainly lectured on it quite a bit. Have I blogged on it? I'm not sure I have actually.
Is it on Clinical at all?
I honestly don't know, Matt. I really don't know. But I'll check it out, and if it's not, then I'll put it up there. But look, it's a very, very interesting thing. So, you know, one of the interesting things here is that what we're trying to do with footwear. So the big issue comes is when you actually have. So every human tissue has a vibration frequency and magnitude. So one of the interesting things is that when you have an input vibration, if it is close to or matches the tissue vibration, then you have a thing called resonance. And the human body really, really doesn't deal with resonance very well at all. So this is when we think that things like tibial stress fracture could actually be quite related to vibration. But what we know for sure is that vibration does cause substantial tissue damage to bone, muscle, blood vessel, and nerve. And we know this quite well because the guys who are out on the high street on a jackhammer all day, they get a specific condition in their arms, which is a Raynaud-like syndrome, and it shuts the blood supply down, and it damages the nerves, and it damages the muscles, and it's quite serious. So that's what vibration does. So, you know, we think that it is quite an important thing to look at, and we also know that you can make pretty good inroads into it with various footwear designs.
Okay, brilliant. No, I would, yeah. So, well, look, you got to stick it up. Just would use this moment now just to remind people that a lot of information, well, priceless information they could get is on Bartold Clinical, yeah, which is a certain amount of it you can read. But... Say again?
I can do a free ad.
It's well, no, it's not. It's I'm always try and shout out the places of information where it's worth reading. But yeah, Bartold Clinical, isn't it? Where you sign up and it's a ridiculous amount of information. I mean, I must admit, I was on it for a long time. Then I don't know whether I talked to you or somebody else, but I tried playing the I've got 2 kids and no money card, and there was kind of don't play that card, mate. Come on. But I had to. It was like,
look, I don't buy that, Matt, because it's 16.
I know. I'm sorry, but I just want to come out and just say that, just in case you look for your memberships now. But anyway, definitely for a therapist who's not aware of the sort of things we're talking about, one of the definite pit stops you need to do. I'm not going to say how long you need to stay there for. Hopefully, you'll be a member for the rest of your life. But definitely check out bartoldclinical.com, isn't it? Yeah. Loads of information on there. I think once you answered the question I put in there on tread on shoes and things, which was great. So sometimes you do video responses. There's up to date with the research. So go-to place for runners. Check it out. We'll make sure that the website is on our comments. Leading us on to, so Salomon, basically, you were headhunted to head their road running range, which was non-existent at the time. And if I remember rightly, they kind of said, they definitely gave you a very nice place to work from. I remember seeing some of the photos from your office. Thank you very much for that. Always makes me feel great. But they gave you kind of like full reign and, from what I hear, quite a large budget just to design a shoe. So that might answer our question quite nicely. It was I've lost it now. Predict, wasn't it? Talk to us about that.
Well, actually, the first range we got over the line was called the Sonic, and I mean, look, it was an extraordinary experience, man. I mean, I when I got the phone call, which I barely understood because the guy had an outrageous French accent, but I came to understand him pretty well in the end. But when I got this telephone call and they basically said, listen, there's no baggage here because it doesn't exist. Do you want to do it? I mean, I was out of the industry. I'd left Asics, and I thought I never want to get back into this industry again. But that was just, I mean, how could you possibly pass up on that? So I went there, and we got this first range called the Sonic over the line, and we really wanted to try and do something that was innovative because there was a bit of an innovation vacuum, and I was very interested in the effect of geometry. So I wasn't interested in putting stuff into shoes. I was interested in taking stuff out and making product that was focusing on weight targets, so very light, and looking at what you could actually do with the geometry of the shoe, because I had an inkling that geometry was actually quite important rather than putting in, bridges and stiff heel counters and all that sort of jazz. And that did lead us onto the shoe called the Predict, which is, I think, quite a unique shoe because it's unique because we based it on a shoe that radically decouples around the major joints of the foot. So in other words, what we tried to do is create a bottom unit, which is the midsole outsole, that provided specific platforms of support no matter where you landed. So it didn't matter whether you're a midfoot, forefoot striker or whether you're a rear foot striker. It was going to provide you a platform of support no matter where you landed. And it was going to decouple in a sense that we thought it could actually do something quite interesting biomechanically. So one of the great things about Salomon is they do proper biomechanics research and they publish it properly, and they do it with a decent sample number. So they actually got together 24 people, and we took this shoe into the lab, and the results came back from our lead biomechanist, who's a very clever lady called Marlene Giandolini. And we said, Marlene, that's complete nonsense. That can't possibly be right. Take it back in there. And the reason we didn't think it was right is that it was showing things like a 20% reduction in major hip load. 20%. I mean, 5% would have been a lot, but it was a lot. So we sent it back in there, and she did that 4 times, and the results came back. So then we said, rightio, now you're going to go back in there and do a gas analysis because we think there must be some penalty in terms of economy, which she did, and it made no difference. But the really extraordinary thing was that we were seeing these changes in load proximally, but with no penalty distally. Now that's against all the laws of physics, so it's actually impossible. So it's got to have gone somewhere, but we can't figure out where the hell it's gone. So there's no doubt it's gone somewhere, but we don't know where. We just can't identify it.
That would get on Craig Payne's wicks. He's always going on about how you can change where load goes and where it's distributed, but you've actually shown that you can make you can make it disappear now.
Oh no! Well, we don't know. We don't think we've made it disappear. We think
where it's gone.
Yeah. Hopefully it hasn't gone anywhere where it might cause any damage. But that is the very unusual thing about this shoe. And apart from the fact that's very interesting, the real joy for me was in being able to, I think, build a shoe that we could fairly conclusively establish that you don't need to be building a very rigid, very hard shoe. I mean, this is a very flexible shoe. And it's completely based around the concept that if you change the geometry of the shoe, then you will probably get a very good result. In fact, we also looked at its, dare I say, anti-pronation qualities against major competitors. It's a very stable shoe, but it's a very flexible shoe, and it has virtually no heel counter, and it has no stuck in the shoe, and it weighs 240 grams. So, it's an interesting concept, and it's something that I really want to sort of continue, because in trail running, it's always surprised me that trail running shoes are made like good old-fashioned running shoes, and they're very angular. But if you think about that, if you're running across the fall line, of course your uphill foot is going to be pronating, and your downhill foot's going to be supinating, and that's going to be exacerbated if you've got a very angular midsole. So the whole thing should be radically rounded. There's no other sensible solution. So you really should be radically rounding the contours of the shoe, which is exactly what Nike are doing now with their basketball product, which I just take my hat off to Nike. They obviously think things through properly. And if I'd gone to a podiatry community 5 years ago and said all basketball shoes should be heavily rounded, they would have said, no, they're going to sprain their ankles for sure. But when you think about it, it's all about the surface contact area with the court. And if it's rounded, because they're very rarely plantigrade, they're very rarely flat on their feet, they're always on the angle, then it makes much more sense for the contours to be rounded. I mean, that's geometry. That's the way it works.
So how? Because the other difficult thing is, how are you getting this information across to the buyer, to the purchaser? What sort of information are you putting on boxes? Because traditionally you'd have your overpronator, underpronator, oversupinator. What terminology are you using now to help educate the person who's deciding whether or not to buy this shoe?
Well, we're not. Everybody thinks I'm mad, but no. Look, it's a really good question, because I think now we are drilling down to the point where this is obviously becoming an educational process that we've been talking about it for too long, and we are slowly making headway. So in the podiatry, physiotherapy, clinical sports medicine communities, people are talking about it more. In retail, the really informed retail guys have totally bought into the concept that you can't define pronation, and so a less is more approach to footwear is probably the correct way to go. There's still going to be. I look at a shoe like the Brooks Beast, and I'm not calling it out for any other reason other than it's a unique shoe. But I've been saying for a long, long time now, that's a 1 in 1,000 runner shoe at best. It's just not appropriate for very many people.
But, and yet still handed out probably by default if you're a big runner.
I was in America a couple of years ago, and I went to a store in Pasadena, and they employed a bloke full time, and his job was to go around to all the local podiatrists in the Pasadena area, and they sold 250 pairs of Brooks Beasts a month.
Yeah.
That'll give you some idea of the level. It's not just the level of education at retail. It's if the prescribers are not understanding that this is inappropriate, well then we can't get to the end game, basically.
So with that in mind, because this is another thing which I think you'll be able to put across. I think the main reason, it's such a strong selling point, the idea that if you're heavier, you're going to need more cushioning, which is basically why they'll bring out this kind of like big cushion shoe. But can you kind of explain, again, kind of using layman technology, why you might not necessarily need, or why more cushioning on the shoe might not necessarily help you, even if you're a big guy or something?
Yeah, well, so there are two main tenets that athletic footwear has been built on for the past 40 years. One is that you would need motion control if you were pronated, and the second that you would need cushioning to help protect you from the impact of hitting the ground. Okay, and that if you bought into that argument that both those things would protect you from injury. So I'm going to look straight into the camera and say right now that there's not a shred of evidence to support either of those concepts, that a motion control is going to protect you from injury, or that increased cushioning is going to protect you from injury. Not one single shred of evidence to support that. So I think cushioning is quite important from a comfort perspective, and it's quite important from a rebound perspective. But we know, and we've known since 1977, when Ben O'Neill first published data on this, that if you put a highly cushioned shoe on, it will probably increase the vertical ground reaction force because it's going to change your lower limb stiffness. Now, a lay audience won't understand that, but basically, if you think of the lower limb as a spring, when you go from a softer surface onto a harder surface, the spring becomes more compliant, in other words, more stretchy. And when you go from a harder surface onto a softer surface, it becomes less compliant, so there's less stretch in the spring. And this is all driven by the supercomputer in your head called the brain, and it happens within 50 milliseconds of you striking the ground. So this is where this concept that cushioning is somehow super important to the health and well-being of the athlete, especially in relation to injury, is just not true.
I had to put you on main screen for that because it's such an important point to get across. I think clinicians can take it on board. And in fact, clinicians really get off on this idea that the central governor is kind of measuring every single step and adjusting the tension in the muscles according to the feedback. It's lovely. But for the general punter out there looking for a shoe, it just kind of makes too much sense, doesn't it? And like you say, it results in these massive big shoes being sold to somebody who weighs over like 90 kilos. It's tricky, but
it's a convenient truth, really. And I think, I think I'd put forward and Benno, I've spoken with Benno a lot about this, that for the bigger guys, we could then have the discussion about viscosity and whether you need less or more viscous materials, which is different to cushioning. But you could put together the argument, so well, a bigger guy or girl actually needs a more stiff shoe rather than a less stiff shoe. So to actually put them in a highly cushioned shoe, I think is the wrong thing to do. And that would bring us into a whole discussion about futurism, which is, coming fast, basically.
Which people will have to go to the RCL International Running Conference in October the 30th, 31st in Brighton to hear about, because I'm sure that'll be part of your presentation there.
We're telling them nothing now.
So brilliant. So cushioning we've covered pronation, we've covered a lot of traditional concepts about shoes, which both therapists and definitely runners need education on. The other thing that I wanted you to comment on with your experience was this thing. It was a recap. Another thing that doesn't make enough of people don't talk about enough is the last of a shoe. I've heard you before talking about that and coming up with some, which I think will shock quite a few people. There's this idea that three different types of last, depending on, again, categorizing runners into different kind of how much the medial arch drops. And your bombshell when it comes to kind of the last, which is used in construction shoes, is?
Well, yeah. I mean, if I was in your room and you started talking about three different types of last based on arch height, I'd be compelled to smack you in the back of the head.
Yeah, that's why I do these. Remotely.
Yeah, and it makes me fairly froth at the mouth when I hear all this sort of stuff. So, yeah, to put some context to all of this is, we've been told that you should choose a shoe based on either whether it's curved, semi-curved, or straight lasted. Well, the horrible truth in the industry is that there's no such thing as semi-curved, straight, or curved last. And I can give you an example from Asics, where I worked for many years, that they have one last for all of their running product. It's called EOR 16, and all of their main running product, with the exception of racing shoes, are built from that one last. And the only way they make a shoe look more or less curved is just by simply sculpting the EVA in the midsole. So there is no change at all to the function of the shoe based on the last, because the last is the same.
So just to make sure that everyone understands, because I can already hear a few people kind of listening to podcasts going, what's talking about last? Explain in basic terms what the last is, essentially.
Okay, so the last is the three-dimensional model that the shoe is built from. So it's an actual physical model that is foot-like, and it's usually, these days, it's normally made out of plastic or resin. And what actually happens is that the last is a three-dimensional structure, and the process of building the shoe is called lasting. So you wrap the upper around the last, and you attach it at the bottom somehow, and then you plug on the bottom unit, which is the midsole and the outsole. And that's the process of shoe building. So the last is the model, lasting is the process, and there are many different ways that you can execute lasting. But Matt, all of this is going to be completely irrelevant very soon, because what's going to happen is you're going to go and see your friendly podiatrist or physiotherapist, and they're going to take all your biometric data and they're going to put it upline to a factory in Taiwan, and they're going to build you your last, and they're going to do it for €80, and then you will have your shoe built from that last.
Yeah, so expand on that. I heard you the other day talking about that. Yeah, tell us some more details about that.
Well, this is actually happening right now, so this is entirely possible. So one of the issues we've always had with a last is that a last looks similar to a foot, but it's also completely dissimilar. So all modern lasts are completely flat on the bottom, because when it comes to stitching, the manufacturing process requires a flat bottom. Now, this has changed quite recently because we have new manufacturing techniques that allow us to actually build a last that looks like a foot. So in other words, it's completely rounded on the bottom and it looks anatomical, and you can punch in all sorts of other things, which we'll talk about in a sec. But the beauty of this is it means that rather than you having certain, I guess, for want of a better word, load points on a flat bottom shoe, you've now got full contact. So it has massive implications in terms of how the foot sits inside the shoe. It has massive implications in terms of this word that I don't like much, stability. It has massive implications in terms of pressure distribution. So all of this can be done right now. Today, I could do this for you right now. So it's a very exciting time to come. I think in terms of what will happen with lasting, I told you that Asics have one last. I think what will probably happen is in the very near future, they'll probably have a library of maybe 100 or 150 lasts, and your retail store or your sports clinician will make a decision based on what they've seen in you, and they say, rightio, well, Matt needs last number 49, and they'll send that data, and that is the last that will be used for you. So I think that's not the realm of science fiction. That's happening right now, and I think that's going to accelerate quite rapidly.
So does that mean that, is this something you can see? I mean, is the whole kind of way that shoes are sold going to have to change? Because that sounds a bit technical for kind of your Sports Direct. No offense to any of the staff at Sports Direct. In fact, any kind of mass shoe shop. Are they going to be able to work with that kind of technology, or does it mean people are going to go somewhere else to get their shoes?
Well, it's a very controversial question, isn't it?
That's what we do here on RunChatLive.
Well, I think there are 2 points here. I think the first point is that people need to get their head around the benefits of the future, and how it reflects with the way they practice now or the way they sell shoes now. The answer is, unless a Sports Direct or something like that radically changes the way they train their staff and radically changes the way they think about it, they're not going to be selling too many shoes. Really technical retail who will embrace this will sell a lot more shoes, but maybe the podiatrists and physios who are sitting there right now, they'll be thinking, this sounds like an opportunity for, say, 2,000 retail doors shut because of e-commerce. 2,000 retail doors. That just doesn't go away. I mean, it's got to be picked up somewhere. And I think that I would expect that podiatry practices and physiotherapy practices will be picking up this slack, because they won't have to carry stock. You don't have to be a shoe store, but you will be selling shoes. And I think that's the blinding reality of it. Now, that's going to be terrifying to some retail, but I can probably scare the pants off podiatry as well, because I can tell you with a reasonable degree of certainty is that in the world of athletic footwear, the shoe will become the orthotic without any shadow of doubt. So orthotic therapy as we know it is probably going to disappear, with the exception of the non-sports arena, where I think it will always be around. But the capability, the ability for the shoe to make the changes that we can do with an orthotic device now in terms of changing a load or changing a force or changing a moment, we can do that right now in terms of inserting 3D printed matrices into footwear. So that's here right now. It's coming fast.
I feel like we're kind of letting out some bombshells here now. I feel quite, yeah. Is this going to be news for a lot of, how many, we haven't got time now, but I mean, I'm a sports therapist by trade, so I'm mixed with other, and in the clinic I work out, there's other physios. we normally have one podiatrist who's actually changed quite a few times. I think podiatrists struggle in the private sector. They come from NHS and then think it's going to be rosy in the private and don't realize how much they have to kind of market themselves or what it is, but they seem to come and go quite quickly. But I sometimes struggle with podiatrists working with them because I still see an awful lot of them old school, like looking at the kinematics. And I kind of say hi and greet them. I drop a few names like yourself and kind of Craig and Ian and judging by who they look at and who they know and where they hang out, I kind of get an idea whether they're still going to be looking at people's kind of arch drop and working old school, or whether they're actually going to be interested in the kinetics. Is there still quite a big knowledge gap with, I mean, it's difficult for you to comment on the UK, but let's say in Australia, for example, is there kind of a big division between old school and new school in terms of podiatry?
I'm sure if it was Griff or Craig here as well, we'd all agree and say, look, there's a real divide here, and I think that for me, there's no doubt there's the potential to exploit a therapy because you can make a lot of money out of it, and that's a reality. I mean, there's no way of hiding from that. I think there's a lot of podiatrists now who are really thinking about how they change the way they practice based on the evidence, and that's just an incredibly positive and incredibly brave thing to do. So the old days where every second patient walked out the door with an orthotic device, I think for a lot of people now that's changed radically. But there are still a lot of people who have a vested interest in clinging to the way they practice, and that's terribly difficult to change because that practice is paying their mortgage. And I'm not sure how you want that.
It's a tricky one because I don't know. Since having kids, I've become more kind of, I don't know, am I less cynical? I don't know. But I honestly believe that, okay, there's a select few in all of our industries, in all the areas, who just do it because they can make a load of money. And they might even know that what they're selling. Every time they put up, the chiro puts up their x-ray, marking it with a big red circle and saying, oh, this is your problem here, but I can fix it, kind of thing. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But I think there's an awful lot in healthcare providers who still don't realize that they're just not getting the education.
Yeah, I think we need to be very careful too here that we're not orthotic bashing, because I'd be really happy to go on record and say I think it's tremendously valuable therapy, and I think it works in the right hands. It works really, really well, and there's a huge amount of evidence to support that. One of the problems we have with the research, and you probably heard Craig talking about this a bit, is that the research never really takes into account the dosage factor of orthotic devices, and this is why often you'll see, a custom-built device compared to an over-the-counter device, and it's not even a remotely reasonable comparison to make because you're not defining the dosage. And you do, good practitioners understand that you're not trying to change the angle of the dangle. You're trying to unload a structure. You're trying to change the reason that structure is loaded. So I'd hate to come across as being anti-orthotic because I'm not at all. What I do struggle with is certain chains. There's one very famous chain in the USA, retail chain, and their stated practice is that every single person needs an orthotic device. Now that's just not true, and that is their sell-on policy, that their staff are required to try to sell everybody an over-the-counter device once they've sold on a pair of shoes. And I have written about this, and that to me represents a really huge issue for the community, and with retail, that particular branch of retail in particular.
Yeah, no, we see it the same with manual therapy, where it's the business model is every single patient that comes to the door or runner, they're going to need 6 sessions. And you're like, well, how can you say that? How do you know they might just need you to say, look, you're fine, you're okay, just alternate your days running, just take a day off in between, see ya. But they just fear the business model, don't they? They just can't think of the alternative. It's a tricky one.
Or they don't want to. Maybe they have thought about the alternative and they're scared by that. A part of my brain can completely understand that, but a part of my brain would also tell me that's not particularly ethical to be behaving that way. And so I think you have to not be completely hamstrung by the evidence, but you have to at least try to understand what it's telling you. And life is fluid. If you can't change, well, then you're not going to get anywhere. So you've got to think about what you need to do.
That's a beautifully. I think I've got something in my eye. Hold on, just get rid of that. Beautiful words, mate. That's going to be. You've come out with a few corkers today, which I think you can stick on your on your tombstone. Beautiful. Well, look, it's 2:30, so that's amazing. I was on the edge of my seat throughout, without lying. I remember it. The clock turned 2, and I was like, still got half an hour with this guy. This is great. So obviously, as always, we could talk on forever, but that's it. That's an hour's gone. Is there anything you would like to mention in terms of, I mean, what were you doing? You're traveling around a lot doing workshops, and what are you particularly doing at the moment?
Oh, yes, I'm on my way up to Manchester for the biomechanics summer school, which I'm very lucky. I got invited to again this year, and there's a really good faculty. Benno is coming across, famous podiatrist and friend of mine, Kevin Kirby from the USA, and guy called Peter Bruckner, who's an Aussie sports physician who is a very interesting guy. So he's in particular talking about nutrition, which is he's very much in the Tim Noakes school of nutrition, and so I'll be very interested to hear what he's got to say. So yeah, it's going to be fun. Then I'm heading over to Canada for the International Society of Biomechanics meeting next month, which will be good. So yeah, there's a bit on.
Brilliant, fantastic. I think in the people who are watching, sometimes I'll say hello to people as they comment, but I just didn't want to miss anything you were saying, basically. But yeah, there's some. I think Matt Hart is joining you all in Manchester as well. I think I saw him talking to Kevin earlier on. So thanks for joining us, Matt. Andrew as well. I think Andrew's coming along to the conference definitely in October, so we'll be able to meet you all then. Ultra Mirage, who. 100k desert run, who I'm going to have the pleasure of going over to, not competing this year, but I'm dangerously close to making it a bucket list for next year, but I haven't said that out loud yet, but I'm going along this year to watch it and soak it up. But have you got anything on your bucket list in terms of sport and stuff? I mean, you've been through everything, haven't you? You're a water skier,
Yeah, my main goal at the moment is just to stay above ground, mate. Well, we were talking before that, we've both got young children, which is a remarkable thing for a man of my advanced years. But yeah, so the goal is really just to be able to kick a footy and run around with them. But yeah, look, I just really like. My goal for this year is actually to try to get a lot fitter than I am right now, and there's obviously quite a large room for improvement there. But I don't have any real plans of doing any events as such. So I'm very happy to come and watch you run 100 miles in the desert.
Kilometers. Let's just get it right. Yeah, it's a big important distinction once you get past 50. Yeah. I don't know. That's all at the top of my head, just talking. I'd like, I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, that's a long way off. So, mate, thank you so much again, especially with your busy itinerary, and you've been up since 4 o'clock. I really appreciate it. And also thanks for agreeing to be part of the conference coming up this October. If people want to contact you, your name changes a bit. So does your icon. You're Ben Stiller in some parts of the world, it seems. But what's the best place for people to contact you?
They can contact me through Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. They're the main platforms I use. Or through the website. There's a direct email address through the website. But I'm really looking.
Website being.
Website is www.bartoldclinical.com. Okay. So they can get in touch with me there. The Instagram handle is Bartold._clinical. No, not dot, Bartold_clinical. And Twitter is just at Bartold Biomecha, not Biomechanica, Biomecha. But thank you so much for having me, Matt. I'm really looking forward to that conference in October. I mean, there's names there that I'm just really looking forward to meeting these people. Izzy Moore, Jack Chu. I've never met JF. So
oh, really? Oh, fantastic. That'd be great. No, that'd be superb.
I'm really looking forward to get in the same room with these people and thrash it out. It'd be really good.
I'm sure they're feeling the same way. Okay, mate. I will say goodbye now, and we'll talk soon.
Good on you. Thanks very much, Matt.
Thanks so much. Enjoy a nice, peaceful, restful day.
Thank you very much. See you later. Bye.
All right, guys. That was brilliant. Oh, wow. Oh, quite emotional. What a lovely guy, and what a wealth of knowledge and information and experience. And like I say, there's people who've been around for a long time, and they, some of them are. Doesn't necessarily mean all the information that comes out of their mouth is blessed. But Simon is one of the true legends who is, he's been there, done it, and he's evolved. He's a great role model for therapists who are worried about evolving, as he admitted himself. He's one of the speakers who will be with us. I'm so excited, in October in Brighton, in my hometown. Funny that I arranged it in my hometown. But along with Jack Chu, as you mentioned, along with JF Scudder from Canada, also got Chris Johnson, who's coming all the way from the States, which is fantastic, from Zen PT Performance. Izzy Moore, he mentioned, who's a fantastic researcher from Cardiff. We've got Mike James, the endurance physio, who's fantastic as well. He's coming from Wales to talk to us. Derek Griffin is going to be there, which is amazing. Fantastic influential player online, amazing runner himself. So he's going to be there as well. We've got Paul Westwood, triathlete, coach and runner, works particularly with the Army. Paul Coker, medical director of Rock Tape, and also he's got his own clinic in Cornwall. And again, a massive player in terms of looking at the evidence and providing evidence-based treatment. Who have I missed out of the 10 off the top of my head? Ian Griffiths. I always forget Ian Griffiths. Little Ian. Not tiny Alex Horn, but little Ian Griffiths. Major name, sports podiatrist Ian Griffiths, who's coming all the way from London. But I'm so pleased as well, because he's been my go-to guy for years and years and years and years when it comes to the foot side of running-related injury performance. So, I think I said 10. All details are online. Tickets are on sale now. If you need any help with ticket prices, I just want people to come. Okay, I have to put a ticket price. But if there's any reason where you think you can convince me why I should give you a discount, maybe there's a few of you, maybe you're a student, maybe you're an OAP, I don't know, whatever the reason is, then feel free to contact me if you're struggling with money. For me, I'm not looking to make a profit out of it. I just want to pay for my time. I need to pay the guests who are coming over and the plane fares from Australia and stuff, and Canada and the States, which are mounting up. But so if there's any way that I can help put bums on seats, I just want you to be there and enjoy it and learn stuff and be able to share it with the runners who you go back to work with. Then feel free to email me, matt@runchatlive.com. Give me a reason and I'll be happy to give you a discount. Right, that's it. I've got to go now. It's Father's Day. I've got a massage waiting for me, which my wife and family were kind enough, because my shoulder's been playing up. So I'm going to go and have a little bit of massage on that. So it's been fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your support. Do please try and share the conference details and the podcast. I worry so much about just not reaching people. My social media is just a drop in the ocean. So I really depend on people who follow me to tell their friends, just to get the word out there. So do please share. We'll be back next week with, who's next week? We're going to be on every week now. Let me just check. Every Sunday we're going to be here now, and the lead up to summer. Next week is the one and only Christopher Johnson, triathlete extraordinaire, Zen PT Performance in the Running Zone on Facebook. Chris Johnson will be in the house. Definitely join us for that. Okay, see you next Sunday. That will be, what time is Chris on at? That'll be at 4:00 UK time, because he's going to be from the States. So next Sunday, 4:00, put it in your diary. I've got to go. See you later. Adios. You're listening to RunChat Live podcast, putting the evidence back into running injury and performance.